Okay, so we are recording. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to PhilosophyCon Part 2. Today, I believe we have 3 or 4 panelists. One of them is a visiting scholar. Luca, thank you for being here today. We also have someone visiting us from another department, but Levi, thank you also for being here today. And then we have Andre and I believe Ryan. We're going to say a few words. Just answer a few of them, right? Okay. Okay, perfect. So I just want to thank some of you. I know some of you came to part 1. It was actually really great. We did the AI immersion, and we also did 5 senior panelists also answered questions moderated by Professor Malmus of the philosophy department. And it was actually really, really fun. So thank you all for being there for that. But today we're going to start off with, I don't know who wants to go first. Who wants to start off first? Well, let's start off with Professor Gottlieb.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Anna Gottlieb, and I'm the faculty sponsor of the Philosophy Club, Philosophy Society, and I came up with these questions. Hope with the hope that they're broad enough to engender a discussion that's not just going to stick to a particular area, but generally sort of focus on the place of philosophy in the world and in your personal world. So I hope that works.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. And then we're going to start off, I guess we'll start off with Levi. You want to just introductions. So just introduce yourself, and then we'll go Luca, we'll do Ryan, and then we'll do Andre.
All right, so can everyone hear me on this side? Great, perfect. Yeah, so my name is Levi Satter. I'm a psychology student. I'm minoring in neuroscience, but I think part of the reason I'm on this panel is because I've worked pretty extensively with Dr. Gottlieb and had my research published in an undergrad journal for philosophy. So I'm really excited to talk about philosophy with everyone here.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you and meet you, all of you. My name is Luca. I'm a PhD student in philosophy in Italy, here for a visiting scholar period. I'm studying theory of mind, and I'd be glad to contribute to this panel discussion.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ryan Mamoon. I'm the current secretary of the Philosophy Society at Brooklyn College, and I'm also a philosophy major with a concentration in medical ethics and a minor in chemistry. I'm looking forward to discussing with everyone.
Hello, everyone. My name, can you hear me? Okay. My name is Andre. I'm the treasurer of the Philosophy Society, and I'm a philosophy and law major and also a psychology major. And I hope we have a great discussion like we did on May 4th.
Awesome. And I just want to reintroduce myself again. I know some of you can't see me. I'm behind the camera, but I am Angela. I'm the Philosophy Society president. So we just had our introduction for our panelists. So we're going to start off with question 1 asked by Professor Gottlieb. And then I guess we'll just do, that kind of line, and we'll just keep doing that for the questions until we kind of get to time.
Okay, so let's start with the first question. People often ask, what are you going to do with that? When you tell them that you're majoring in philosophy or minoring in philosophy. So what are you going to do with that? And what do you think is possible for philosophy majors beyond their undergraduate years?
Okay, so I suppose start with the least philosophical person in the room, and we'll build up. What I think is prized in philosophy is clarity of thought and being able to reproduce someone else's ideas as if you were producing them for your own, which I think allows you to understand people's complex and nuanced perspectives. So what am I going to be doing with philosophy? I'm going to continue to apply it for essentially like understanding like psychological, like new psychological directions, but also like for helping me understand how to best move within the world. And where can it be applied? I mean, I truly think that it can be applied anywhere. I think one of the difficulties is that its use is a little bit softer. It's something that doesn't have like an exact, this is the skill you're going to get. But I think that when you apply it in a variety of areas, including politics, research, even business, you can absolutely then be more effective in any of those areas.
Okay, yeah, I can continue. Like, sorry for my bad English. I didn't prepare anything to answer the question, so I will do a lot of mistakes, but probably you'll be able to understand me. So, I look at the philosophy as a toolbox. So you have a lot of different tools. You can apply all these different tools in all different topic, and in the science or in other field like, I don't know, aesthetics, arts, and so on. So a lot of time I wonder myself, what is the meaning of philosophy now in a period in which we can see that all the hard science, the STEM science, can discover a lot of new things about the world and a lot of new things about the mind, for example. And I think that that's just obviously my opinion, but I think that the philosophy can predict or can direct the research in the uncertain environment. So we have a lot of topic in which we don't have a scientific description. We cannot have a scientific description of what is consciousness, for example, or I'm working on theory of mind. We don't have a scientific model to that. And I think that in this way, the philosophy can help. So in general, if you have this tool that you can understand with studying philosophy, you can apply in everything. You can apply in some very practical stuff, working in IT, for example, managed with artificial intelligence, or you can try to lead the scientific research at all. So yeah, that's it. Like if I can conclude with that example, if I have to think about a very good, important philosopher out of the philosophy books, I can think about Einstein, because Einstein, in theorizing the relativity theory, he used a lot of philosophical tools like the thought experiment and so on. So that's why I think that the philosophy is useful. Like you can use it, and that's what you can do with philosophy. So you can apply philosophy at everything. That's my opinion.
Right, Luca. And can you just let our audience know what you're actually studying right now? So I think that would be a good help for them.
Yeah, I'm actually studying theory of mind. So I'm actually trying to understand how the comprehension of other intention, emotion, fear, or thought works. And actually, I'm studying how can we know if non-human animals have these abilities. So this have theory of mind, and I'm actually using like the philosophy in this field is the field of cognitive science. So philosophy for me works as how can I say, as a bridge for putting communication all the different science in cognitive science. So you have a lot of topic in distinctly topic, like separately topic, like linguistics, psychology, neuroscience, and the philosophy can let them talk every area of this topic. So that's what I'm going to do with philosophy. Actually, I try to create a comprehensive theoretical framework to understand how the mind works.
Yeah, so similar to what Luca was saying, I also think that philosophy can really help us understand science, conduct scientific research. I'm actually a pre-med right now, and I'm in the process of matriculating into SUNY Downstate Medical Center after I graduate next month. So I think definitely philosophy helped me do better in my pre-med classes. And after I started taking philosophy classes, I realized that like I'm much better able to understand my orgo or biochemistry textbooks, really make different connections between different topics learned. And just that analytical skills and critical thinking skills I developed in philosophy, it's like really went a long way in like preparing me for the MCAT and various other obstacles that I faced in on my pre-med journey. We actually even had like a recent like event where we brought back two philosophy majors who are currently at SUNY Downstate Medical Center. One of them is about to be a surgeon, and he was crediting his philosophy major to a lot of his success in his medical school career and doing well in interviews for residency and kind of navigating through the ethical dilemmas of the patient-physician encounter. And just really encourage like everyone to study philosophy.
Yeah, so much like Luca and Ryan, I view philosophy as sort of this interdisciplinary bridge. I think philosophy is great, especially when you know what you want to do and you want to specialize in something. And I see that with a lot of people, they're usually specializing in something like law, medicine, cognitive science, neuroscience. And I think for me personally, the way I use philosophy, it helps me understand the concepts and read through things a lot quicker and a lot more comprehensively. And I think the biggest contributing factor that philosophy has played in really my education is just my willingness to learn, because the topics they're relatable, they're interesting, they're questions you ask on your own but never get an answer to. And so I think that's why philosophy is a really great place to study.
Yes. So often we seem to ignore the fact that philosophy is the genesis of so many branches of in science and also just the body of knowledge that we have in the world. And it makes sense for philosophy to play that role of genetic role because prior to establishing anything at all, what you have is your mind and the ability to question things, to speculate, to come up with thought experiments. That's within philosophy. So it makes sense for philosophy to actually not only bridge so many things in the world, but it also gave birth to many of these things. So it makes sense for the bridge to be there because it gave birth to those things. So sometimes people are saying, "Oh, philosophy is not going to take you anyway." It's so wrong because certain things I even forgot in math. Now taking philosophy, it allowed me to see these things in a totally different way. So philosophy is just a light, that light you need to help you clarify things, to help you sort things out. So it's just like a tool beyond
For
tools.
that addition, Mark. So yeah, we'll go back to question 2 for the senior panelists. Thank you.
What what do you think makes non-philosophers suspicious of philosophers in philosophy? What as philosophers can we do to communicate with those who think that we're not in touch with reality and other common complaints?
Yeah, so what do you think makes non-philosophers suspicious of philosophers in philosophy? The fact that for a lot of people, you're basically having this person that says, "Hey, I'm trained in thinking. I think better than you." I think that's what a lot of people think. And it's sort of weird because philosophy is sort of this thing where it's largely about reasoning. In fact, it's almost all about reasoning. You can't claim anything without reason, at least in philosophy. And so it's very discomforting for people to have to confront someone who's really an expert in any field, but to say you're an expert in reasoning itself is sort of like, what, you're saying I can't think? It's sort of that that weird confrontation. But I think that's why there's so much discontent with philosophers, and it sort of sounds pretentious when you say, "Yeah, I'm a philosopher." But really, you don't need to study philosophy to do philosophy. It certainly helps a lot, but you don't need to be formally trained in philosophy. And there's really no excuse I mean, there are excuses, so I won't say no excuse, but yeah. But there's, for many, it's why not engage in critical thought? Why not answer the life's questions? Why not? There are people who have valid reasons, but I think for a lot of people, especially in America and the Western world, we have the privilege to study philosophy, and a lot of us, for whatever reason, maybe not so much in Europe, but in America, we don't.
Thank you. Yes, I think what you're saying is there's also misconception, and it makes sense. Questioning is uncomfortable because people, you have psychological comfort in knowing things are not going to move away. You have a solid ground. So once you start thinking, about philosophy, and philosophy will force you to question things you may take for granted, and that is not comfortable. That's probably why the average person, or let's say the average person tends to find philosophy kind of like scary because it will disturb what I have taken for granted, what I have taken to be the truth. And guess what? Once people realize they may not know the truth, they think they're fool. And nobody wants to feel that foolish. And it is that misconception about philosophy that okay, that this philosophy is going to make me, say what I don't want to say. It's going to make me agree where I don't want to disagree, where I want to disagree. So it is that thing that philosophy does to people. It disturbs the water, mothers the water. So that makes people. It's kind of scary because comfort is important for psychology.
Yeah. I'll also say that, I mean, it's not just philosophers; it's doctors even. I mean, you tell someone how their body's doing, they'll say, "Well, it's my body, not yours. I know it better than you." It's not just philosophy. It's, I think philosophy is an interesting place because it's sort of, well, at least people view medicine and doctors, they see the immediate practical application. They don't see it as much in philosophy, and it sort of seems pretentious when you say, well, this isn't how you're supposed to think about things. But it's really with all the professions, I would say.
So just to add a few things, just to add a few ideas to what Andre just said, when I put this question together, I sort of thinking, I was thinking about the numerous exchanges I had, when I was an undergrad and onward about, what philosophy would be, what does this mean? And I think for me, the way to this question is, the question of what do you do and are you in touch with reality? And I think the question is sort of assumes a particular understanding of reality and doing something where it's, doing something could be like producing widgets or producing something, and the reality is the world in which the widgets are produced. And so I think philosophy cuts against both that definition of doing and against reality that I think is disturbing to a lot of people. But I also think it could be exactly the inflection point where conversations can start and actually make people question that very reality, not in the sort of matrix kind of way, but I actually had a conversation with a student years ago about this. Like, so philosophy is kind of like that moment in the matrix where you take the pill. I said, well, maybe, but it could also be a very different moment. You realize that there is no matrix and this is actually what we have. Like, this is the actual reality. And the question still remains, what do we do with that? And I think both of those questions are equally important.
Thank you, Professor Gottlieb, for your wise words. Who were we with? We have to just get back to the 10. Okay, yeah, we could take a comment.
Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm not really in philosophical society. I'm not a philosophy major or anything like that. I would just like to answer this from like as a person who's not like a philosopher or whatever. Um, well, I don't think non-philosophers are suspicious necessarily of philosophers. It's just that we don't really understand what it was about. So like before I took like one philosophy class in medical ethics, like I viewed philosophy as like useless thing. You know, like just like it's not useless, just like useless as a class. It's like not something you could really learn. It's like something you learn through experience. Like when I think like it's useless to take as that class. But like now I took like medical ethics. It's like it's really about critical thinking and like putting yourselves in these like thought experiments, like where you put yourself in a comfortable situation and you have to flesh out how you're going to react to stuff and what is the right or moral way for you to help uh, solve these situations. Kind of.
Okay, so I think how many people do we have left? Should we move on to question 3? We just have to keep it rolling. So let's go on to question 3. Or did you?
Thanks, Tom, that was a very interesting story from somebody not in philosophy. From my perspective of interacting with law, especially in the military, which is filled with 18 to 21-year-old males who are gung ho, so it's a different kind of mentality. But still being philosophical, talking philosophically with people like that, they, I think, distrust a lot when you were talking about the supremacy of philosophy, this belief in philosophy, basically amongst philosophers, that they have the monopoly on truth, which contrasts a lot with religion, personally, but with just non-religious thinking in general as well, of this esotericness to philosophy, right? And so how can you claim reality and truth when you have such schisms, which are imaginary on the face of it to people not in philosophy? What is the other in whatever's philosophy, right? The other thing, okay? If you understand it in a specific term, you specify it in a specific term, it's completely divorced from the more common sense interpretation. Wittgenstein, Liberty was obviously talking about the same exact thing, right? More common sense application, philosophers get bundled up in the cycle of imagination, which is useful, but it's so divorced from a non-philosopher's way of thinking about utility of truth and reality. So there's such a divide between what I see, because I'm in philosophy, but between what people, there's a chasm of understanding. You brought up a very sobering perspective of the simplicity of philosophy. And in philosophy, we get away from that a lot.
You think we want away from the common sense view of philosophy?
First of all, and second of all, the movement in post-analytic and non-philosophy, which is part of the contemporary field, these divisions, contemporary analytics, etc., not contemporary, sorry, transcendental, right? So these movements question these very foundations of philosophy, the a priori that was obviously Quine's big thing, and later on, but past that, what they call the decisional trees or whatnot, right? Prior to the what maybe Slavoj Žižek says the pre-ontological disturbance before the ontologies, when he was talking about Buddhism, side thing. But in that arena of common sense thinking, I also have trouble because I'm in philosophy of thinking back to the more common sense interaction with reality and thought and all that kind of things, because it's so interesting and descriptive and useful in the other truth realm of philosophy of those divisions. So I do have trouble actually communicating with non-philosophers about philosophy, about other things. We play philosophy, talk about them. So, and I don't see I obviously don't have.
So you think we should go back to a practical way of doing philosophy
I
where
don't know what it is.
that philosophy could be
Part of it is the simplicity of language.
it's most accessible to the common person? Is that
Oh,
what
part of
you're
it is psychology.
So you make sure that you have,
Of explaining things that are very.
Yeah,
let's make sure you're speaking with the thing, because this is a recorded panel and this is gonna be, yeah, that's, Andrea, if you wanna.
you want me to move? This doesn't work. Mine, I mean, my phone never works.
Yeah, so oftentimes I do find myself in that awareness of where is philosophy going? Where is philosophy going? Can it ever, is it ever possible for this meta philosophical thing to destroy its own past itself? That awareness, possible, right? And in that awareness, talking about that awareness, so there's three things. That awareness of the meta philosophical future, communicating on the common sense of people that are not philosophers, and then talking about the contents, which we talk about philosophy and common sense, the content of stuff, right? Experience and situations. In that psychology of communication, we kind of have to go back to of remembering how to think non-philosophically almost to do philosophy better, if that makes sense. I don't know where I'm going, but I kind of see these frontiers and these horizons, both phenomenologically, both as limitations of philosophy, and in trying to actually, not answer big questions that's later on or different things, but just actually have productive conversations with non-philosophers. That's a difficulty for me as a philosophizer, not a philosopher. I haven't written anything.
But even if we were to do philosophy on the basis of common sense, we will still have to systematize.
Yeah.
And that very act could be scary to some people. Not everybody wants to organize knowledge into predictable elements or factors. So that will still be kind of like slightly harder than what an average person wants to engage in, because to organize even common sense stuff, it's not that easy. I mean, to collect things and put them into categories, it's not that easy. Even if I have to do it with rocks or trees, it's not that easy. That's why not every printer is actually.
There's a complexity to description communication, right?
But sometimes it seems to me that maybe this is just the way I would philosophy. You kind of need one word to get a conversation. The word is why. And I think, before we start to systematize and build superstructures of thought and rationality, for me, the question, if somebody says something, a student says something, or a non-philosopher says something, if I want to engage with philosophically, the first question for me is, why do you hold that view? Why do you think this view makes sense? And, people begin to, quote unquote, do philosophy without realizing that they do it. And I think that's the best way into it, rather than, we have to learn the rules and the language and that. It's one of the best ways, to learn a language. And philosophy is kind of a language. I'm not a native English speaker. Russian, French, and then Russian, French, and then English. So for me, to learn English, I basically was just dumped into an English-speaking society and had to learn to swim. I don't suggest to do that with philosophy, but in some ways, people begin to do philosophy before they know they're doing philosophy. They're beginning to understand it before they even know what they're understanding, and I think that's the way. And I think for that, what you need is patience, because I think too many philosophers become frustrated that, you're not using the right word, that's not the right term, and I think that's kind of secondary. Mm-hmm. What you need is the why. Anyway.
Okay, so can we go to question
Yeah, okay.
number 2? Okay, Luca,
Yeah,
if you
can I
want
share just my thought about the question number 2, because I'm probably just a little bit biased, because in Italy, everyone in the high school study philosophy. So everyone know about philosophy. But I think that there is a wrong storytelling about philosophy, because we are used to think about philosophers as the people that just ask questions about different things. And in Italy, we study just history of philosophy. So we do not study in the high school philosophy of mind or philosophy of science and so on. But if we really look at the history of philosophy, philosophers are not people that ask questions, are people that try to answer that question. So they ask questions, but they try to answer. And so, first of all, we need to change. I think that we need to change this storytelling. So we need to start to communicate first, because we are not communicating at all. So philosophers are in the history. Sorry again for my English, but start to be very close, and they start to talk just each other. They didn't search for a conversation with other. So we have this first fault, and now we try to change that things. But also for other times, philosophers just stop to discuss about philosophy problem, and they just start to discuss about philosophers problem. So we just start to discuss about a lot of things that just we care, but not the world. So I think that that's like the first big problem. And we have a second problem that is more a more shared problem about the different majors that we have, because non-philosopher can be suspicious about philosopher, but we have a lot of like movement now that are suspicious about medicine. So we have Novak's movement. We have a lot of people, I don't know, maybe also here, but in Italy there is a lot of people that when the rocket space, the rocket that just going to the space, they just ask why we waste all this money to explore the space. These have no sense. So we have two problems. First of all, we just stop to talk with other science. In Italy, I participate as a speaker in some ethology conferences, and sorry again, there was just two philosophers, me and my supervisor. There was no other philosopher that just start to discuss with biologists and ethologists, and that's a big problem. And the second problem is that the science just stopped to not stopped at all, but need to improve the effort in science communication, in communicate what we do to the other people. If you look at the origin of philosophy, the philosophy was discussed in the agora, in the streets with the people. Like Socrates literally just asked questions to the people that walked in the street and bother everyone with all these questions because it was important. We just stopped to do that. We just start to talk in the university, very far from people, and not just we as a philosopher, everyone. So I think that it's not just a philosophy thing; it's a shared thing, And yeah, that's my thought. So I hope to be clear. So
we totally get it, because you're saying insulation is a problem. Because once you become insulated, what happens is that you're creating like a shield that prevents new ideas from coming in. And we know that the public has a lot to say about philosophy, because as Professor Gardner just said, people started doing philosophy before they even know they're doing philosophy, because we're a questioning species. We inquire about things. Why are we going to die? Where we're going to go when we die? Who made us? Where's God? These are all philosophical questions we ask even before we know that we're doing philosophy. So insulation is a problem, because we create that close-knit community that prevents us from communicating with others, and it is wrong. If we want philosophy to advance, we have to open the field to give more people access. Yeah.
Do you want number 3? Yeah. Actually, this is completely related to what you just said. The emphasis in education, especially in the last 10 years or so, has been on STEM. The humanities, including philosophy, have too often taken a back seat to the more quote-unquote practical areas of study. What can we as philosophers say to those who take philosophy to not be practical or useful or even self-indulgent at a time when so many local, national, and global problems seem to be of daily concern?
Oh yeah, I think I could start off with this one. So to me, it seems like took numerous scientific pre-med classes alongside my philosophy classes, and right off the bat, you'll see that there's like a very like stark comparison or like a stark contrast where like in STEM, it's mainly about like many people can get by in STEM just through like memorizing facts or basic like I guess like solution manuals and just like reapplying them to like on their exams and whatnot. And in similar things in research also, people are kind of just like driving forward without actually like contemplating what they're doing and the implications of their research. And I think this kind of creates many problems where the research is almost going too fast for our comprehension. And this leads to the rise of the anti-vaxxers who thought that like since the vaccines were initially made from mRNA, this novel technology, they couldn't be trusted or they were a means for a government to actually harm people instead of helping them. So I think philosophy would actually, and the humanities as a whole would help us understand and navigate through those research and those ethical dilemmas that are associated with introducing new research and implementing them.
So I think what people fail to realize a lot of the times is that a lot of the practical things that we think of, like the actual practical roles, the roles that we need for society to run, the roles that, quite frankly, society would implode upon itself if we didn't have, like in politics, government, management. A lot of these roles are occupied by people in humanities and in philosophy, and they serve a broad role for society at large. And we sort of think of all the innovative roles, not so much as the actual role that we need. We don't need a garbage can with Wi-Fi built into it. It's really not necessary. I mean, it's amazing that we can waste resources like that. And I mean, it truly is amazing. But at some point, you have to ask yourself, how much technological innovation do you really need? And has it actually benefited us? Has it actually benefited the disparities in humanity? And the answer to me is no. If you want to actually have real change, you're going to have to engage in complex theories. You're going to have to engage in ethics. You're going to have to engage in morality. You're not going to need, what you're going to need is not more doctors and lawyers. You're going to need someone who actually cares and can relate to you.
But power. Not just that, but power, action.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Because we can theorize and talk, but actually we gotta force it because the powers that be are forcing it in the other way. So it's so much more than power thing.
In Europe, a few weeks ago, we had a professor, Tommy J. Curry, and philosophy in Europe is much more prevalent than in the US. And I think that's partly why Europe has less problems. I mean, they're definitely not perfect, but I think they have a better grasp on how to at least address their problems, and they stand more united as they're more accustomed to philosophy than the US is. And I think a lot of what you see in the US is this indoctrination and also polarization. And people think in terms of sides, not in terms of just finding the ultimate truth.
I think we can also use the overemphasis on STEM to our advantage. We can also remind them of the historical reality that a lot of the sciences they take for granted actually had roots in philosophy. And we can use that to make an inductive argument by saying, okay, doing philosophy now is likely to produce more sciences you will cherish in the future. So we can use that to our advantage as well. So we create, because they're relying on utility. So we're saying, okay, look at the past. We have produced all the sciences. They come out of philosophy. So more than likely, if you invest money in us now, more science will come, even if that is not what we really want as the ultimate goal, but we can give them that as a way of getting more resources and more influence. We can use that in our advantage.
I think something I've always advocated for, or personally felt has been one of the strong suits of philosophy. It's like being able to specialize, being able to do philosophy while doing other fields. So specialization, I think, is sort of it accompanies what you're saying quite well.
Yeah. So sorry. No. So you propose like a backdoor strategy, something like okay, yeah.
I'm a military, so it's tactical.
Yeah. Probably that's useful, like to survive as a philosopher, but we also need to say to all the world that the scientific progress is not enough, because the most important thing is that you don't have to lose the humanity with the scientific progress. And we have a lot of topics in philosophy, like ethics, for example, and we need that for a good democracy. We need to say to the world that probably our like, it's strange to say that in the capital of capitalistic system, but that probably the capitalistic system is totally hand. Like with the pandemic situation, the capitalistic system proved that it doesn't work, and we need to find another strategy to. Okay, so we need to find another strategy, another political, another sociological institution systems to survive, and we need to cultivate. I think that okay, I got it. We can use the backdoor strategy to survive, but we also need to say to everyone that there is something that is not more important, but important as the stamp, like.
Yeah, so there's a lot of focus on this panel about like philosophy in society as itself and in relation to these big ideas that society is then influencing. I think one thing that's really important is actually from an individualistic perspective. With philosophy, how many times have we had an idea, we presented it to the group, and then in presenting it to the group, we realize flaws with that idea and ways to expand it, and potentially ways that we never would have if we hadn't first presented it. And I think that's one of the biggest, at least within my own personal experience, uses of philosophy is that it really allows for clarifying your thought and the thoughts of the others around you.
Also like to, sorry. I would also like to add something. I feel as though there's this emphasis on science being above philosophy in a sense. And I seem to disagree with that because philosophy and science both study existence. And when you look at science, it studies things that are physical. Yeah, we know that things that are physical are not all that is in existence. For example, free will, what happens after death, the God debate. These questions cannot be answered by science only. Or by, for example, I can take, does God exist? If you're using scientific evidence to prove what this, with that, you can't really go anywhere because God, by definition, is a being that is outside of things in this realm. And science only studies things as they exist in this specific realm. So when we fall into this trap of dividing philosophy and science, we basically have an incomplete knowledge on how things really are. And I think that's a big issue because then we're left with a lack of knowledge, you could say. And if the man has, and if knowledge is infinite and we're able to gain knowledge, then why must we limit what we can know? And I feel like that's what this division causes in society.
Yeah, I mean, in the meantime, like probably in the meantime, like probably the emphasis in STEM is also because we now have we have a very big challenge. Like we have the environmental challenge, so the climate crisis, the energetical crisis. So actually, we have like the entire existence of the humanity is at risk. So we need to find a solution, and probably just STEM can find that solution. Probably that's the reason why. There is probably a good reason why the education systems has been on STEM, but yeah, like the point is that we have to find a solution that care also about not like sorry again from English, but we need to find a solution, not a mathematical solution. So like if we want to solve the environmental challenge or the overpopulation problem, we can also say like, okay, we can kill the alpha demand. Okay, we solved the problem. We just stop to like destroy the environment so far. But the science cannot answer well all these questions without the reflection about humanity, what we care about people, and so on.
Yeah, especially the artificial intelligence we're doing now. That's going to be a boon for science.
Yeah.
You know, because expect also biological transmutation. The idea that we're combining species, that would be a boon for philosophers, because those questions cannot be answered morally or ethically by scientists. They would need philosophers to come and sit down and see what's going on. And that's going to help philosophy, get more visible.
Question 4. In this age of ChatGPT and other emerging AI technologies, how the kinds of deep, unhurried, deliberate practice of thought, reading, and writing the philosophy requires become obsolete in favor of faster, shallower, and more on-demand content? If so, can philosophers maintain out these changing paradigms, or do we reorient ourselves to the new ways of communication and thought?
Sure, I'll start and then
Okay.
we can
I
go
thought you were
around the other
going.
way. Yeah, so I think obviously we need to reorient ourselves to communication thought. Anytime that you have, movement forward in science, it is important to then incorporate that into our philosophical discussions, I think. That being said, I do think there is something really important about the deliberate practice of reading and writing in creating clear thought. So what ChatGPT could do, right, is give you a really nice explanation and thorough, in many ways, explanation of the thoughts of any writer you could ever think of. But your incorporation of those ideas in your own mind is not going to be full and complete unless you continually re-engage. So, for example, I've read many papers, I've read many books, but the first time reading through is not going to give me all of the ideas that are incorporated within the book. In the same way, using ChatGPT as a resource, I think, can be very useful moving forward. But I do think that there is a lot of benefit for us individually as human beings to understanding ideas by continually re-engaging with them, and even continually re-engaging with the same writing. For example, like, if you go through, if you're reading a book, you can give a good summary the first read through. But if you then go through and start writing notes, you start having conversations with yourself throughout this reading, you end up having a more full understanding of the symbolism and the metaphors within, of the driving force behind it. And I think that is something that might be lost or could easily be lost in this push for quick information now, is that we as individuals need time with ideas.
I think touching on what Levi said, that's actually something we really touched on during the AI experience, when we talked about like the ethics, and we talked about like what's the difference of learning through AI and learning as we regularly learn now. So yeah, I just want to say that's really what we talked about on May 4th.
Can I just add one sort of stretch for this. So I use the word content in this question deliberately and in quotations because the word content, and I still have to think more about this, why it bothers me so much, but the word content is very often used when people talk about stuff in a YouTube video, right? Or just, any kind of social media, somebody is a content producer, right? GPT, chat GPT, in a sense, is a content producer. And because everything gets called content, I think you sort of lose, and I'm going to get really annoyingly philosophical here, you lose the sense of the sacred and the profane. So this philosopher Kierkegaard, he had this interesting notion, he called it leveling. And leveling is this process that he saw in modern society of people being unable to see what matters and what doesn't. Everything is kind of on the same level. So to me, calling everything content, which has been going on for a while now, it's not ChatGPT's fault, but calling everything content sort of reduces everything to just some bits of information that somebody's contributing without having any sort of valuation of that information. Anything is content. You're a content producer, you're not. I've heard somebody a while ago calling a professor of content. So professor produces content for the class. And I just felt my hair just set itself on fire automatically. Because I just found a number of really problematic issues with that. So I think a part of that, part of including the word content here is not just about ChatGPT, but just sort of leveling the information regardless of what it is, who produced it, and for what reason.
On the flip side, the content now produced by not just ChatGPT, but other GPTs, other NLP AIs, is so much, we've all probably used it, I hope, so much richer provided to the population than what we've had, and obviously what philosophers are able to provide at any given time. So changing, should philosophers be afraid of a new changing paradigm as part of the question?
I don't think it's a matter of afraid.
Not afraid, but what's the specific wording?
It's not
Can philosophers do anything about the changing paradigms? Right. So I think this is kind of what I'm seeing happening right now. There's a huge race happening, and people that are in the race are, I'm going to use a word that I've heard being used in that industry, operators. So the operators are going to be distinguished from the non-operators, the people that are not using it or are not able to sufficiently use it. So I think what philosophers, people in philosophy departments should do in this changing paradigm, very specifically, and I mean this, is create their micro NLP AI, and it's very doable. You can create a GPT in like 30 minutes in Python if you want to scale it up to be bigger for a philosophy community. Let's say Stanford Philosophy Encyclopedia and other communities coming together and specifically training an AI, NLP AI, reinforcing it in that exact manner to produce an NLP philosophy AI. And in that manner, actually imagine how to push philosophy forward. Because just from what I've experimented with GPT 3.5 and 4 with philosophy, I could just lock me away and I'll just spend days and days on it. It's that fascinating of what it can actually produce. So I think if actually a concentrated effort of philosophy departments and communities can come together quickly, because it is an operated kind of game, but what's the competition of philosophy? Each other, I guess. I think that's how you progress and push philosophy in this new paradigm. Technically,
I disagree with that because maybe
that's one approach.
Yeah, maybe I have a bias against the chat GPT, maybe it's biased, but to me, process is potential discovery. I think if you give that process too much to, let's say, to a machine, you're cheating yourself out of discovery. You're interacting with it. It's not the machine doing it. You're interacting, you're processing it, generating part of the question, part of it. Yeah, but you also, if you're giving too much of the process to the machine, you're losing potential discovery, because a lot of things in life, the process matters. It's not just the end result or where you started.
When you
I
read the
think we're
philosophy
giving
book, do you discover things?
yes, because it's but it's different when you let ChatGPT does the processing for you. You arrange in words, because even when you arrange in words, you might see things differently, because you may end up, let's say, with conditional statement, and then you do a contrapositive, which is something else. But if you let ChatGPT does that for you, you're cheating yourself out of it.
Well, you shouldn't give it all authority and say, "Oh, that's the answer."
So why do you think?
It's
Why does demarcation line for
If
you?
I ask
Why
you a
is the
question-
optimal point at which you just do not let ChatGPT do it for you? At what point?
Because-
at the very beginning, at the start, in every single prompt, the way I interact with it is I see the synthesis, I create part of the interaction, it gives me something that I can then, oh, somebody said it, or I read it somewhere. It's the same exact way that I interpret the content, completely unbiased. It's you or GPT or whoever. Okay, this is content that I'm reading. How am I now integrating it with something that I'm thinking or writing or having a conversation with somebody about GPT? Okay, now we're pushing this forward. What thoughts am I coming upon? What thoughts am I coming upon? And that's how I'm utilizing it, not giving it authority that, oh, that's the truth. I'm coming up with these supposed truths and then integrating them, however, but it's a tool. It's
Sorry
not
to interrupt.
We're talking about like the Chat GPT and how it affects the general area of philosophy and critical thinking, right? I kind of think it's like a blessing and a curse, because as you said, it helps to engage with the process of wanting to know after reading, and you want to expand your knowledge of what you're trying to know. And it gives you, the emphasis of different aspects of what you're trying to know. Like it broadens what you want to see. But then again, it's so easy for a human to become very less eager to try and go with their own process without any assistance. So when I'm thinking about it, it's like I could, if I'm reading a book, let's say I'm reading some book about absurdity, and I want to learn what it really means about absurdity. I'm trying to engage and learn the actual philosophy behind it. Then I just go on ChatGPT and it blatantly tells me it. It's kind of like I just cut the whole process. Like I just skipped the process of my whole questioning. Because what's life without questioning? If I can't question what I'm trying to engage in or what I'm trying to learn off of a firsthand experience, and I'm just going to instantly cut through, discard the process, like you said, I'm basically I'm not really gaining an urge to actually become a philosophical thinker. And I think anybody can be a philosophical thinker, but it's like, I don't want to take using ChatGPT to be for granted if I'm trying to learn more about just one specific topic. You can use it here and there, but you can't become so complacent with using it more than you can actually think, because then you're taking away the whole principle of philosophy, to think. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, I think that talking about ChatGPT, when you talk about AI, oversimplifying, but you talk about statistics, and we never fear that statisticians can steal our jobs, actually. So, because actually the AI is statistics with a lot of data, okay? And another problem of the AI is that they use a very big amount of energy and computational capacities to do a things that we can manage with a few energy and a very few calculus abilities, computational abilities. We have, we can say that ChatGPT just statistically link the more right word to the previous one. So we can say that we have one probability over, I don't know, 1 million, 1 billion that can that the output could be a very new philosophical new thing. But how much energy I have to put in that process? Also if you train an AI very well on a topic, they are not they're not trained to the heuristic reasoning. They cannot use knowledge from other part inside their engineeristic reasoning process. So actually, with the GPT, you just can use the text input, but GPT cannot use the I don't know, an image, a video, a feel, an experience to infer something. So they actually doesn't infer anything. So that's not a problem. But that's a challenge that we can always win, because we can integrate different information. We can be very generic. We are not very specific. So ChatGPT is very do a very well job in create text statistically correct, but that's enough. They cannot discover a new process. So we can use specifically GPT to I don't know, test our hypothesis. So we can write a good hypothesis, put in ChatGPT, and see what happens if an AI analyze logically our argument and our hypothesis. And that's probably a good instrument. But we cannot use it for discovering new things, for the creation of knowledge process.
I disagree there. At that point, okay, I definitely disagree, because I see the statistical creation of the words as what we're doing right now and what our brains are doing. It's like I'm spontaneously creating the probabilities of these nodes, right? I don't really know, everybody experiences this, right? So in a similar way, that's what it's doing. And so along these paths of probability of these nodes, there are statements, most of them are novel, but they go into categories and so on and so forth. But in that arena, there are multitudes of novel insights that I've personally come across just philosophizing GPT. And I just see it as non-dissimilar to what we're doing right now. It's just more efficient, has the capacity of 173 billion parameters rather than however many we have at any continuous awareness or attention. So it's in that way like a super baby version of us in some, bad analogy. So as a tool instrument, knowledge is possible in that synthesis. New knowledge, that's why I was proposing that creation of a specific philosophy AI to.
But as you say, you have new insight talking with ChatGPT, not ChatGPT.
Of course.
So you can use it. Of course, like I see AI as a new tool, like when we discovered the microscope. Okay, for example, so we can have new data. We can have. Yeah, I'm agree.
That was the new knowledge. That's how I see it.
That's just a new data. And the point is, how can you interpret the data? And we have a little difference in GPT, because so I don't talk about the AI at all, but just because with the AI, you can absolutely have new data, and you can use that data to discover new things. I'm agree with that. But there is a lot of bias, because you train and create the AI. You use your previous background in creating the AI. And after you create, you can use unsupervised learning or other different technique, but we can just imagine new stuff. We have a different cognitive, so we have a different cognitive abilities. We can change, and I finish, promise, we can just stop to think about our background and say, I don't know, I can talk a parallel universe in which everything is different. And if I ask about ChatGPT some things like, can you please, I don't know, create I don't know, a new language, or no, probably in language you can do it, but I don't know, you can create a new political systems based on a different things. I don't think that is very good enough.
it can and it has. It actually has
But
created
just
new
because you have
colors.
previous data. But
Right.
if you move on undiscovered topic.
So you're defining knowledge as creative and imaginative and new, whereas I see it as not just that, but also on the current knowledge, reinterpreting knowledge, reinterpreting, re-articulating, remodeling.
What about moral card?
I was going to chime in more.
Yeah, go ahead.
You talk about it on the aspect where I feel like you're missing a factor of about interpretation and application. I feel like a lot of people, like I use ChatGPT, for example. I use it for math. And math is a subject that I do not find applicable into like my future career, my future studies, at least the expanded version of it. I think like the basics we all need, but of course, like expanded, algorithmic, all of that stuff, I don't find that will be something that I will be continuously applying, and that does not diminish the fact that I'm still someone who is going after the fundamentals of critical thinking and assessing the things that I see in my life, the things that I take in, the things that I talk about. I feel like a lot of people can use ChatGPT in worlds where they, of course, don't understand subject material and use it to more say just kind of like get by, right? And that still doesn't diminish the fact that you, of course, when you find something of substance, if you find something you truly care about in terms of investigating, assessing, and analyzing whether or not these things, affect your life and how you, in your view and your output, you can still do that. I feel like being able to just interpret the type of like information at hand and understanding that this doesn't affect the way you go after information and investigate, but also in terms of just going back, like even the information you get from ChatGPT, sometimes it may not be the most reliable or it may not even apply to what you're like initially looking for. Because I find sometimes when I search for certain answers, this is way off topic, or if it's a different context that the teacher's not referring to. And I feel like if you are somebody that, wants to use ChatGPT as like a source, of course, you're going to go and further the research and the understanding. And then there's, of course, people like who just literally just need the answers to get by. And then I wanted to go over what you said about content and how you don't like the idea of leveling and how it diminishes the importance of information. I agree, but I also don't think it's such a deal to where I feel like focusing on the fact that it doesn't diminish the intellectual labor like put into like finding the source. I think content, when I think of content, I just think of somebody like you said that produces the information for the subject matter. Of course, back to interpretation, depending on what it is, depending on the type of person you would either see this information as useful, or you would either see this information as like the person who is given as if they're reliable, if this is somebody that has good background knowledge and has assessed like the fundamentals of whatever they're teaching. But I don't feel like content as at all like really does, like I get what you're saying between like putting information that's important, because of course like we all that, but like I said, that depends on the person and that depends on the audience, to be honest, of what they deem it, if it's important coming out your mouth. Because if not, like you said, that is where like the whole leveling process comes. But I don't think it diminishes like the fact that people actually go out, discover, assess, and analyze all of the things that they're putting out.
No, yeah, I agree with your position, but like my only doubt about using AI is that so you talk about math. You cannot solve the I don't know how can I say in English, but the Gödel incompleteness problem. So you cannot explain a set of rules using the same set of rules, and that's the point. So we just talk about the STEM, the science, the relationship with philosophy, and all these things. The point is that we actually have some assumption in every field of knowledge that cannot be justified at all, and no tool can work on that assumption. Just philosophy I think it's philosophy that field. So is like metaphysics. But when you talk about the unjustifiable assumption that are behind every kind of science, no tool can work on that. Just philosophy, with of course scientists and all. But if you talk about physics, for example, you cannot we have the effect of the like electromagnetical field. We can see the effect of Okay, in philosophy, is the problem about the realism and anti-realism in science. So the point is that we have invisible things, so the assumption, and we cannot be sure if these assumptions are correct or wrong. Probably are wrong because we have a lot of problems, for example, in physics with the quantistics physics rules and the normal physics rule. We don't have a unified systems of rules. And I don't think that any AI can solve this problem. So yeah, you can use it for discovering new things in your paradigm, but you cannot use it to change the paradigm.
And also, there's also the problem of moral neutrality. The way the AI is designed, because in class philosophy of mind, Professor Lewis sent me an article about Noam Chomsky wrote, and he showed that AI is actually a coward morally, and it doesn't take stand morally. And because of that problem, two things, exactly what you said. It cannot assume, because it cannot assume, it cannot start the pretty much thing that we need to do science and philosophy. It makes no assumptions whatsoever. Therefore, that's the big thing we need to solve problems, and it doesn't take a moral stand. It's a moral coward. So it cannot really, the major problems we're going to deal with in the future, AI simply won't be able to help us out, because the two main things we cannot do.
Also, there's another problem with AI in the sense that, there's thinking and there's thinking about thinking, right? It's sort of like a
Meta thinking, yep.
right? And there's the question of, I want to say folly and a sense of what it's like. Klein talked about that, but I think there's also a sense of what it's like to think about an idea. So what it's like for me to think about an idea would be very different than what it's like for you to think about an idea, but it may very well influence the take that we have or the way we understand it. And I think, maybe in the future, ChatGPT will have the ability to have this quality, and that's when I think we should start getting a little scared. But I think right now it processes, I hate to be so blunt about it, but it processes information in large language really well, which I think is very distinct from the way that our brain processes our experience, which is, I think, they're related, but they're really different things.
Part of what I see perhaps is our miscommunication is that I'm interested in demystifying the expectations of GPT and demystifying therefore what it is. As you are alluding to, it's a tool, but when you're talking about a tool, you're putting upon it expectations that I don't have from a technical point of view, from a computer science point of view, from that very sober, yes, statistical point of view, as you were saying. So I think the miscommunication is that your, I think, expectation of this simple AI, this NLP, is, oh, it can't produce new knowledge, however you define knowledge, however you define new knowledge. First of all, if philosophy is metaphilosophical, as we say, it doesn't produce knowledge, just knowledge about knowledge and talk, right? That's a whole different thing. So we can, in negative thesis type of ways, right? Not positive thesis, as philosophy is often, and you were alluding to that as well before. We can clarify many of our current paradigms, even past modern philosophy paradigms, ancient philosophy paradigms. We can clarify them, I think, through GPT and through its next versions and through perhaps a philosophy centered NLP. I think that tool, demystifying what that tool is how you understand what the knowledge is that it produces. Because if you think that it's an oracle type, that it's, is a big movement, most people are thinking of it as an oracle type, not as a tool. But even the people that are thinking it's a tool, right? If they're not technically minded, there's an oracle mystification to its expectations. And so in that arena, you see its responses as something different than from what I see it as from a computer science point of view, partly joined philosophy, where it's a huge encyclopedia that I can shift through really quickly, very cleverly, and reinterpret that, previous, I can ask it again to get the same exact question, but with different answer. So now I have two answers and then compare them and just keep exploring these possibilities as I would if I were looking up, in Stanford Philosophy Encyclopedia, what is object-oriented ontology? And then I look at a different encyclopedia, Wikipedia, blah, blah. I would get different interpretations. I'll talk to you, I'll talk to a philosophy professor, et cetera, et cetera. That's how I see the tool terminology of it in a purely demystified version where it's not about, oh, it can't produce new knowledge, et cetera. You can still take advantage of the paradigm that it's presented to you in the philosophy manner by knowing from just a slightly layman's point of view, the prompt engineering interaction with it in the prompts. If you know that, then you see that the knowledge that it creates is actually a negative thesis type of thing rather than a positive thesis with more mystified version tools.
I'm sorry to ask, where do you see philosophy going in the next 20 years, 50, 100, 500?
Wow.
Why? Why do you, and do you like this potential growth?
Can we just, I just want to just have the five panelists answer this question since we only have 5 minutes. So we're going to start Levi, Luca, Ryan, John, Andre.
Yeah, I'll start. This is a hard one. I think the next, well, I'm not going to speak within the next year or even 5 years, but I think within the next 10 years, there will be a resurfacing of some kind, maybe even the next 5 years. But I think there will be a resurfacing of some kind. You can choose to call it philosophy, you can choose not to. But I think in the humanities in general, because I think what we're seeing now with global instability and all the wars, all the disparities between classes and countries, I think the humanities in general, and especially philosophy, will have a lot to say about what is going on, because it's not enough for science to just solve the problem. We need philosophy and humanities to tell us how we will solve the problem, because you can solve the problem very easily or relatively easily with science, but even in like, for example, I'm taking environmental ethics with Michael Menster, and I think there are a lot of different ways to solve climate change, but how we do it is really the biggest question, and science isn't going to answer that question for you. So all the problems from now up until 500 years, if we've been around, or well, humanity's around, I think philosophy will be there to answer that.
I want to. Okay, you're gonna go.
I think, yeah, to like similar to what Andre was saying, I also think that philosophy can be kind of like a uniting force. We've seen like politics now, and then various fields of like science. There's like there are very polarized groups, and there's not a lot of like communication between them. I think philosophy can kind of be a way in which we like find a middle ground. And now you see like I think people are beginning to do a lot of philosophy, but kind of on their own. See like a lot of conspiracy theorists. I think they kind of just do philosophy on their own, and they're kind of just insulated, not able to be exposed to like the philosophies of other people. I think like if we like continue with these discussions and teaching philosophy, then we could kind of like bridge that gap and kind of allow us to like kind of refine that middle ground, where we could like move forward with solving a lot of the problems that we're currently dealing with.
I will say that conspiracy theorists are in their own way a good sign, because that shows that people still care.
John, I feel like, I don't know.
I just feel like philosophy today, a lot of people describe it as being a tool, and I don't necessarily, not that I disagree with that, but I think that
it's sort of like an art form in itself, you know, similar to poetry or like even a painting or music, you know, and because, you know, I feel like people often argue what the point of philosophy actually is. And I'm not sure if there really is one, you know, because if you consider what like philosophers do and what they enjoy doing, it's not necessarily acquiring the answers, but trying to find them, you know, and often the answers are very much unattainable, you know, and I feel like, I don't know, there's a certain pleasure that comes with like, practicing philosophy if a person is passionate about it that is more than just a tool, you know, because I think that, I don't know, because in music and a lot of art, we find we can still use them as tools in a certain sense, you know, but differently than a direct like bridge, so to say, to solve our problems, you know, and I think like the beauty in philosophy is like sort of becoming lost today, you know, because I really love like you know, like more poetic philosophy, you know, and unfortunately it's virtually well, it's sort of oppressed today actually in the philosophical community, especially, you know, and I think it's sort of a shame, you know. Yeah, sorry, I don't know, yeah, it's just yeah, but I am very hopeful though and optimistic for the future of philosophy because I think that, you know, as a reaction to what's going on now, I think we're going to see resurgence some more like poetic stuff. Maybe, I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I don't really have much to say. Yeah,
Thank you. I just want to give a round of applause to our panelists. Thank you for coming here today and really sharing your experiences and sharing your thoughts on these questions that are really important to answer. And I want to also give a round of applause to Professor Gottlieb for making the question